The moving van hadn't even found the reverse gear on my driveway yet when I saw her coming. Marching across Aspen Trail like she was leading a siege, designer tennis visor, pristine white, 8:30 a.m. on a gorgeous Thursday, a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shiv. And she had that stride, you know the one that tells you in advance, I am about to ruin your morning, your week, and possibly your life. In less than a minute, this woman, Veronica Sterling, would call 911 on me for the crime of trespassing in my own newly purchased home. And in 3 hours, she'd discover that I owned not just the deed to this house, but to virtually every block she surveyed, including the monstrosity she called home. My name is Ethan Cole, and this wasn't just a new zip code for me. It was the most calculated personal real estate move I'd ever made. 6 months before, I was just another ghost in Silicon Valley, a burnt-out tech guy who'd sold his cybersecurity company for more money than any one person should ever have, but who'd lost the one thing that mattered. My wife, Sarah, was gone 2 years, a sudden aneurysm at 34, and every corner of our old life was just a tripwire of shared memories. I needed an escape, not just from the pressure cooker, but from the silence. This lake house, the old Abernathy estate at Cedar Creek Landing, was supposed to be my reboot, my blank canvas. I just hadn't expected the paint thinner to be labeled HOA president. "Excuse me?" She shrieked, stopping just short of my front lawn, her voice carrying a frequency that, I swear, made the lake water ripple. "That vehicle is in clear violation of the community's temporary parking protocols. I need to see your residency application and mover permits immediately." Permits? For moving my own belongings? I lowered a box marked Sarah's Vinyl and turned to face her. This was the infamous Veronica Sterling, the HOA dictator my realtor had vaguely described as having very active community leadership. Code for, she's a human cancer cell. "Good morning," I said, trying to dial down my inner rage mode because I genuinely wanted peace. "I'm Ethan Cole. I closed on the Abernathy house yesterday. The truck will be gone by noon, but we have a few hours of unloading yet." Her platinum hair didn't even twitch. She scanned me, my worn cargo shorts, the faded college hoodie, and her eyes narrowed in pure judgment. "That's impossible. This property belongs to the Abernathy Trust, and they would never sell to someone like you. I am Veronica Sterling, and as HOA president for 12 years, I can assure you that no sale has been approved by the board." The Abernathy patriarch had passed away months ago. The estate was in probate, but Veronica was so accustomed to wielding absolute power that the notion of a legal transaction occurring without her blessing was simply a reality she refused to accept. I pulled up the recorded deed on my phone. "It closed yesterday 4 p.m., certified by Lakeside Title. Would you like to review the county stamp?" She recoiled, genuinely like my phone was carrying a contagion. "I don't need to see fraudulent documents. All property sales in Cedar Creek Landing require board authorization, which you clearly do not have. This is a scam, and I'm calling the authorities right now." My movers, 2 absolute legends named Rico and Stan, stopped pretending to work and were now leaning against the truck, watching the show with the resigned fascination of men who'd seen it all. Stan gave me a silent, pitying thumbs up, while Veronica treated the 911 dispatcher to a dramatic monologue about a suspected organized burglary ring and suspicious accomplices, my movers. Of course, I glanced around. 3 neighbors were outside, and none looked surprised. They looked exhausted. Across the street, an older gentleman, Gary Hayes, caught my eye and gave a deep, meaningful sigh, a nonverbal welcome to hell. When the cruiser arrived 12 minutes later, Officer Ramos stepped out with the world-weary gait of someone who'd fielded countless calls from this exact address. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, the patience in his voice stretched thin. "What's the nature of the emergency today?" She pointed at me accusingly. "This man is trespassing. He's presenting forged papers, officer. The safety of the entire community is at stake." Officer Ramos examined my license and the officially recorded deed. After what felt like an eternity, he looked back at Veronica. "Mrs. Sterling, everything is in order. Mr. Cole legally owns this property. He is free to continue moving in." The look on her face, pure, unadulterated shock, was a masterpiece. It was like watching a cartoon villain have their gravity suddenly disabled. That's impossible. I would have been notified. The HOA must approve all sales. The officer sighed. Ma'am, continuing to harass the legal owner is harassment, and making false reports is a crime. If you continue this, you may face charges. But Veronica never retreats. She puffed up to her full, albeit diminutive, height. Fine! You may have cheated the system, Mr. Cole, but I'm putting you on notice. You will follow every regulation to the letter. The Abernathy place has been vacant for months, and I guarantee there are immediate code violations. I'll be conducting a full inspection this afternoon. She then marched back to her Mediterranean monument to bad taste. The whole performance having achieved nothing but earning her another citation from the local police. Gary, the neighbor who'd sighed, came over immediately, wiping his wet hand on his shorts. Gary Hayes, that's the fastest she's ever gone from 0 to 911. You really triggered her, man. We shared a laugh, the kind of cathartic laugh that binds people in shared suffering. Gary warned me about her ruthless fining habits, like the time she fined the Johnsons $3,000 because their grass was half an inch too long. $3,000 for grass. He explained that her husband, Wallace, had made a fortune in medical devices, and Veronica's deep pockets, coupled with a judge brother-in-law, made her untouchable. Most people just paid to make the legal headaches go away, and that was the point where the gears really started turning in my head. I looked at the street, at the other houses suffering under her rule. What none of them knew, what Veronica certainly didn't know, was the full extent of my fresh start. I hadn't just bought one house. I'd spent 6 months quietly, systematically acquiring every available property on Aspen Trail through Horizon Acquisitions, LLC. My house was simply the final piece of the puzzle. Gary, I asked, how many people around here actually like living under Veronica's rule? He snorted. Nobody can stand her. But she controls the board through fear. We've tried to vote her out 3 times. She always finds a way to intimidate someone into backing down. Interesting, I thought. Because in a few hours, Veronica was going to learn she'd been collecting HOA fees and issuing fines for properties that all had one thing in common. Me. Later that afternoon, the inspection crew arrived. Veronica, a few perfectly coiffed women, and poor Wallace Sterling, the treasurer, who looked like he'd rather be getting a root canal. They had a hastily prepared document, Section 47, Subsection 3, Paragraph A, authorizing a mandatory inspection. I took the document, made a grand show of reading it, and then delivered the first blow. This is fascinating, Veronica. But this document isn't notarized, it lacks the required state filing number, and it references statutes that were repealed 3 years ago. You're not entering my house without a court order. Her face turned a truly remarkable shade of puce. You can't refuse an inspection. I'll fine you $500 a day until you comply. I just smiled. You're welcome to try. But first, you might want to check the original neighborhood covenants from 1945. The Abernathy estate predates the HOA by decades. It was never legally part of the association. A hush fell over her little army. Even Wallace looked up, a tiny spark of hope in his defeated eyes. That's ridiculous. We've been collecting fees from this property for years, she stammered. Have you? My title search showed Mr. Abernathy never paid a dime in 40 years, and he had a rather extensive correspondence with your predecessor about the HOA's lack of authority. Would you like me to share those letters? They're quite entertaining. Veronica retreated, sputtering, warning me I'd made a very powerful enemy. I closed the door and heard them arguing on my porch for a solid 10 minutes before the angry clip-clop of her expensive heels faded away. The next morning was petty hell. I woke up to a front yard decorated with fluorescent orange violation notices. They were taped to my car, my mailbox, even a couple of lawn gnomes that came with the house. The fines totaled almost $2,000. The best one? Excessive quietness, indicating possible suspicious activity. She was literally fining me for not making enough noise. I watched from my window as she tried to rally the neighbors with a petition for my removal. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman 3 doors down, actually threatened Veronica with a rolling pin when she tried to push past her. It was pure cinematic gold. It was time to drop the hammer. That night, my attorney David confirmed the final, most satisfying piece of the puzzle. We hadn't just bought houses. We had acquired the controlling interest in the Cromwell family trust that owned Veronica's own colossal mansion. The other beneficiaries, Harold Sterling's siblings, despised Veronica and were bleeding money from the trust, so they jumped at my generous offer. Horizon Acquisitions, LLC, now held the keys to her kingdom. The following morning, Veronica called another emergency meeting in her driveway, microphone crackling, ranting about the clear and present danger I posed. She demanded the neighbors approve a special $5,000 assessment for a legal fund to drive me out. The shock on people's faces was clear. This was too far. I walked over, holding the stack of orange notices. "Good morning, everyone. Veronica, I wanted to return these. Littering is a crime in this county, and I've documented it. Also, I'm particularly interested in this $5,000 extortion scheme," she shrieked, totally losing composure. "It's a neighborhood protection assessment." Protection from what? Me reading books and eating salmon? I glanced at the crowd. I noticed Veronica hasn't mentioned that she's been collecting fees from properties that aren't even part of the association. My attorney just informed me there are 15 such properties on Aspen Trail. That's roughly $72,000 a year in unauthorized collections, close to $1 million over the last 11 years. I wonder where all that money went. The crowd went silent. Wallace's face went white as he frantically pulled out his phone. People started muttering, pulling up property records on their own devices. Veronica's carefully constructed empire was dissolving in real time. "This meeting is adjourned," she cried, trying to grab her mic and flee, but it was too late. I let her go, knowing the real punchline was still coming. An hour later, she showed up on my porch with a process server and a cease and desist order. Triumphantly, she thrust the papers at me. "You have 24 hours to pay all outstanding fines, Mr. Cole." I took the practically meaningless documents, smiled, and handed her an envelope from my entry table. She tore it open, expecting victory, but her face froze. It was a formal notice. Horizon Acquisitions, LLC, the new trustee of the Cromwell Family Trust, would be conducting a full maintenance inspection of the property at 1900 Aspen Trail tomorrow morning. "This is impossible. What is Horizon Acquisitions?" she stammered, trembling. "Horizon Acquisitions is the company that controls the trust that owns your house, Veronica. You might want to check with Wallace about those papers he signed last week, something about restructuring the trust for tax purposes." The process server vanished like smoke. Veronica spun on her heel and sprinted back home, pulling out her phone for what I knew would be a spectacular, life-altering screaming match with poor Wallace. The final act was at the community center. Every homeowner was there. Veronica was haggard, her perfection finally cracked. She tried to rally them, claiming I was destroying the community, but Wallace stood up, the man who hadn't had a spine in a decade, and his voice was tired but firm. "Veronica, stop. It's over. I legally restructured the trust. We've been bleeding money for years because of your vendettas. And the HOA? It's $300,000 in debt because you've been using the funds for personal legal battles." The room erupted. I walked to the front, and the noise subsided. "Here's what's happening. First, Veronica is resigning immediately. Second, we are having a full forensic audit. Third, every illegally collected fee will be returned. And fourth, we vote on dissolving the HOA entirely." Then David, my attorney, walked in with his laptop and connected it to the projector. The forensic report showed that of the $2 million collected, nearly $500,000 had been funneled directly into Veronica's personal accounts. As the word embezzlement hung in the air, Veronica tried to bolt, but Officer Ramos was already at the door. He escorted her away for questioning. We dissolved the HOA unanimously. I hired Gary as the local liaison for my properties. I sold the majority of the houses to the tenants and neighbors at fair market prices, keeping just a handful as stable investments. Veronica and Wallace ended up moving to a small condo in Arizona. The last I heard, she was a receptionist at her disgraced brother-in-law's law firm. 6 months later, we held the first annual Cedar Creek Freedom Festival on the restored private beach. Gary raised his beer. To Ethan Cole, who proved that sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well, it's buying your enemy's house and charging them rent. I raised my own beer. Sarah would have loved this chaos. I came here for quiet, But I ended up finding a community that just needed one person with the resources to stand up to a bully. The lake was calm that evening, reflecting the lights of the houses along Aspen Trail. Every family, for the first time in over a decade, was united in something other than fear. They were free. And sometimes karma doesn't just come around. Sometimes it buys real estate, serves eviction notices, and calls the cops on the exact person who called the cops on you. So, here's my question for you. If you had the money and the legal means to dismantle a tyrant like Veronica, would you have waited like I did for the perfect moment? Or would you have dropped the hammer the second the police confirmed you owned the property? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of suburban justice.